Hey, you guys. So let's today talk about the stereotypical relationship of the husband who wants sex more than his wife, or the husband who turns to porn and his wife is upset and it's labeled a sex addiction. I'm going to be referencing in this video the recent newsletter from Dr. Marty Klein, where he talks about both, and I'll link the video in the description below. So the first one here, we're going to talk about the pushy husband who feels like he deserves sex. This is not a good way to go getting sex from your woman, guys. I work with men and I can't help them out with how to speak to the wife, to draw her in to be more closer and more intimate, not by demanding sex. So let's watch this short video clip here.
Talk about a man who says that he needs sex so frequently that he has a right to have sex with his wife, even if she is not in the mood. You know, sometimes I want to gesture toward a male patient. Hello, it's 1953. They want their sexual attitudes back. Every year, I must say to at least a dozen different men, no, you don't need sex every day. You want sex every day. I then follow with, every adult wants things they don't get, and apparently this is one of yours. Now, I understand that enjoyable sex every day or two can be a glorious part of life. And the truth is, very few people with jobs and children have that. I do think that as a society, we should spend more time grieving the loss of our young adult sex lives. But grieving is different than whining. And it is most certainly different than pressuring and criticizing a partner, which is what I see far more often. It puts a woman in such a difficult position when her mate says, I desire you so much, and it's so painful not to have you. How can you possibly deny me? It can be surprisingly difficult to break through a man's narcissism and insecurity to help him find a kernel of empathy for his partner. These guys tend to frame their desire as a compliment to their partner, but they're really not seeing their partner's humanity, only an opportunity for their own gratification and validation. Eventually, a lot of these men insist that they're married to someone who doesn't like sex. This misinterpretation makes things worse, of course. Sooner or later, unfortunately, these guys will be right. Now, I also work with people who insist that their male partner orgasm every time, preferably inside of them.
So in that next part of the video, he talks about how so many men enjoy sex even though they don't have an orgasm, and how women struggle to understand it and get very upset about it. And I work with men, and it's true. So I welcome you to check out that whole video or subscribe to his newsletter even. Now I want to talk about sex addiction treatment. Dr. Marty Klein has written a book, His Porn, Her Pain, where he talks about how a husband's or a partner's use of porn doesn't mean he doesn't value the relationship. If porn is a problem, the relationship is a problem. I have a little bit of different opinions about porn. I think that porn use, depending on what kind of porn people watch and how often they watch it, especially for young men, is very, very damaging. I think Dr. Marty Klein lives in the Palo Alto area, and he works with well-to-do, mostly Asian couples. And I often see young men who have never been in a relationship, and porn really destroys them. Like the gentleman who contacted me off my YouTube channel, wanting to connect with me because I'm beautiful. So I sent him the link to my book website and my coaching website, and he came back with, do you have Snapchat? And didn't even write out the word you. I'm like, if you think you can contact a YouTube creator, a life coach, and a mature professional woman like me, asking for a Snapchat, so, you know, where did you think you could talk to women like that? Where did you see women that would respond positively to that? Where did you get the idea a woman could be talked to like that? I can rest assured I doubt my sons would ever talk to a woman like that. because they deal with real women, not women they've seen in porn. If you can't get real women and the only women you guys see are in porn, it's going to distort your view of women, in my opinion. So I took down that video I made about the Snapchat because it sounded really angry and I was getting nasty comments. I don't need that. It's interesting because I go out, people don't talk to me, guys don't talk to me. But when they email me, some of these guys think they can just ask me for freebies of one kind or another. They'd never say that in real life. But I digress. One thing that I really believe in is when you write something on your social media or in an email, I check myself with two questions. One, would I say this to that person if that person were standing in front of me? All right. Else I'm a coward. Are these words I would say to this person if they were standing in front of me right now? Number one. And number two, another check is I'm using my real name and I'm putting my persona, my ego, my human self on the line with this comment that anyone could see. If anybody else would see this comment and my professional reputation here is at stake, is this a comment that I wouldn't be embarrassed for the world to see? That I'm talking like this? Could I say this in front of the internet audience without being embarrassed about my conduct? But when a guy just emails me like that and goes off on me, I might just say you're a loser if he deserves it. But just speak to people respectfully. Learn to have some class. Those of you who don't know, don't send dick pics. Don't contact women asking for a Snapchat unless they're shaking their booty on Instagram. And that's not what this YouTube channel is about. Anyway, let's go on now. This is about sex addiction treatment. Dr. Marty Klein does believe, and I don't know if this is based on his work with couples. I think it's also based on research because he cites a lot of research in his book. But of course, research can be tainted any which way. That there is no such thing as a sex addiction. He doesn't believe in sex addiction or porn addiction. And he points out that psychotherapists have very little training in sex therapy, maybe only up to 10 hours of their whole training, and that mostly has to do with, children or domestic violence or rape and things like that. So he says the actual sex therapists that have studied sex, they don't believe in a sex addiction. So sex addiction fits with two popular narratives: that porn drags people away from happy relationships. I don't think so either. And that when reasonable people behave self-destructively, it's because they're out of control and the grip of a mental illness. Now, for me, when I speak with young men who watch a lot of porn, I ask them why they watch porn. What kind of, why they watch porn. And the young guys will tell me they do it when they're lonely or when they're bored. That's when they do it. Now, I don't know why I can assume why a married guy would do it. I would assume it's because he's not getting sex from his wife. People, unless they have like a huge avoidance streak, people who have access to a partner would rather have sex with that partner than with porn, usually. And if they're watching porn instead of having sex with their partner, there's a problem in the relationship. This is what Dr. Marty Klein says. And I don't have any reason to disagree, but maybe there are reasons to disagree. So he was working with this couple, who we call Xavier and Maria. And they had, Xavier was in sex addiction therapy because his wife had discovered him watching porn and she was pissed. And so they had him in some kind of a recovery program where he needed a sponsor and admit he was out of control. And so they came to him. Maria rarely initiated sex. And when Xavier initiated, she frequently rebuffed him. They started quarreling. He worked full-time, she worked part-time and raised their two kids. They kept growing apart. Xavier's dad had a stroke. that got him more, frustrated with that. They became emotionally distant, and she withdrew from ordinary physical affection. So now there's no physical affection. Maria doesn't care because she doesn't want it, but Xavier is really unhappy. So, like most reasonable people deprived of a sexual connection, Xavier masturbated. When she caught him, he said he would stop. He didn't. She caught him a few more times. He always promised to stop. Now he was a liar and she was angry. He was a porn user and he was a liar. She lost all respect for him. She loathed his infidelity and his video whores. After a serious work injury, Xavier's doctor sent him to a physical therapist. The PT's simple touching moved him. Xavier recalls, I almost cried the first time he did it. He was so touch deprived that just a physical therapist, I know what that is, just a physical therapist putting like his hand on your shoulder or something. My husband never did that. He just wanted to fuck me. It's very, people need comforting touch, and Xavier wasn't getting anything. When his insurance coverage ran out, he stopped for a while. Then he went to a massage parlor for a massage, which was cheaper than physical therapy. Soon enough, he was offered a happy ending, which he accepted. Xavier recalls, I hadn't had a hand on my penis in 8 or 10 years. It felt so amazing, so comforting. He felt alive driving home. He had to hide that. And he felt guilty, and he had to hide that too. What to do? So he returned to the house of gentle hands and returned periodically. He would say one more time, if he had a fight with his wife, or his daughter would visit with the baby and Maria would fawn over the baby, he would feel empty and abandoned because she was fawning over the baby and ignoring him. So he would just go do it again. Then Maria found out about it, and instead of being curious about why he did it, just like with the porn, she was furious. She was bitter and judgmental. To her, it seemed he was spiraling downhill. And since he was so ashamed, she was just more and more angry. This is what the sex addiction folks love, a story of a man breaking promises to himself. Clearly he was out of control, an addict. Since the drug was porn and happy endings, he was a sex addict. But not according to me. Like so many women, Maria had read about sex addiction on the internet. Their situation was described perfectly. An angry and self-righteous wife, a husband doing things he shouldn't and lying about it, a husband who wanted more sex than his wife, a wife who felt unattractive as she was getting older. So Maria gave him an emotional blackmail situation. Either admit you're a sex addict or I'm leaving. That's what those websites told her to do. And that meant a barrage of questions. She wanted to know everything. But the question that kept lingering was actually a good one. If you're not a sex addict, why would you do this? But she seemed vindictive, not curious, so he hedged. He wasn't sure why. Week after week, I pushed him to discover the answer and urged him to tell her whatever it turned out to be. After weeks of guided introspection, Xavier finally came out and said why he had done all of this. And I think this is very beautiful. This is very beautiful. It's very honest. It's very vulnerable. And this is what Xavier said. And I think this is what the married men would say that who have found solace in my company. I'll tell you why I masturbate so much. Look at porn when I do. I eventually went to massage parlors, he said. It was a bunch of things. I was lonely. I felt invisible except as a father and a source of income. You stopped enjoying sex, then stopped wanting it. Sex became a chore for you, and so I felt diminished. Then you stopped wanting to touch or be touched. That's when things really collapsed for me, he said sadly. I just think that is so moving, and what an invitation for her to soften, you know? What an invitation for her to soften and go, wow, you know, that was so vulnerable. And that would be an invitation for her to say, feel a sense of relief and maybe say, thank you for telling me, and just giving him a hug, or saying, I didn't know you felt so lonely. I could see why. I felt apart from you also. I felt distant. I felt stressed. I know I haven't been there for you. And I, in turn, felt angry and betrayed and like you didn't love me anymore. I lost connection with my own body. I lost connection with our relationship. Where can we go from here? She didn't say any of that because, you see, I don't think Xavier was the problem, in my opinion. I think in this case, Maria was the problem because she was a cold. See, there's some people who cannot. She was a cold, self-righteous victim, and she was resentful, and she was a martyr, and she's not going to let that resentment go ever. There are people like that. Even if their partner changes, they will not change because their resentment and their anger is part of their identity, in my opinion. This is me analyzing her. So when Maria had heard all that, she was still pissed. She laid in on him. Plenty of people deal with all that without massage parlors or porn, Maria said. Yes, Marty Klein had responded, but you did just reject the answer to the very important question you've been asking him. Do you want to discuss it or not? She's like, no. She insisted he was broken and that none of this was her fault. I said that wasn't helpful for the marriage. So what did Maria do? And this is why the guy went there in the first place. Because she was, I'm sorry, she was just a cold, whatever trauma she has that made her cold, she should have worked on. That does not give her the right to just be so cold to him. Meanwhile, Maria got ever deeper into the sex addiction model, seeing herself as traumatized, a victim, virtually a martyr to her marriage. Various infidelity websites persuaded her that she can't ever trust her husband again because he has a lifelong disease. If he won't go along with this concept, it's this disease talking. It just proves he isn't serious. In contrast to the sex addiction model, I emphasize the following points in treating this painful infidelity case. I'm going to say it wasn't infidelity, but according to her it was. Okay, masturbation. Number one, masturbation is not the same thing as porn use. Was she upset about him masturbating or about his porn use? I reminded her they had no premarital discussions or agreements about either one. She's outraged that he's doing something he didn't originally promise to avoid. Number two, stop the full disclosure for now. Stop asking how many happy endings he had, what age or race these women were, whether he climaxed standing or sitting. Because all these details just give people more to obsess about. The betrayed has more things to obsess about. Number three, he deserves to have a voice in what happens going forward. And this is what I want to say to all the men who are being sexually neglected by their wives. I work with men. This video is for you guys. And ladies, you got to give your guys sex. Your husband and the man or the person being sexually neglected has a say in how the relationship is going forward. They're not to be punished for all eternity. She doesn't own the relationship as a consequence of his infidelity. They each should talk about what they want different if they stay together. This isn't simply a matter of her dictating the conditions under which he gets his marriage back. This is so important because if he doesn't stand his own partnership ground, she can hold that over his head anytime she doesn't get her way. and use it as a manipulation and control tactic. The next point, the sex addiction model sees sexuality as a potentially dangerous form of energy that needs to be restricted and controlled. This handicaps people in creating a vibrant sexual relationship, and it problematizes the person who wants to use sex as a vehicle for self-expression, exploration, creating novelty, and challenging their own ideas about intimacy. Whereas the goal of sex addiction treatment is the ongoing control of someone's passion, my goal is supporting people in discovering authentic ways of expressing their ever-changing sexuality. Contrary to the sex addiction model, I don't support the idea that he's out of control. Rather, I push him to discover why he's making recurring decisions whose consequences he doesn't like, which don't fit his values. As a bonus, this removes part of the basis for her self-righteousness. I want him to work hard to understand why he did it, why he hides it from her, and why he doesn't want to do the work to have sex with her. Yeah, if I were Xavier, this is what I tell my guys. If your wife isn't having sex with you, you can go to her and say, do you miss how it used to be between us? I miss you. Do you miss how it used to be between us? And invite her back in through her heart. Invite her back into the relationship. Invite her to go into therapy to work on the relationship. And if she doesn't accept the invitation, a gentle invitation, an invitation, not a pressure. I miss you. You got to come back, no pressure. A lot of guys are afraid to talk that way, but you have to. And if she resists the invitation to come closer, to reconnect, or to put energy back into the relationship and value the relationship, do you want to be with someone like that? Now you can grieve being in a relationship with someone who stopped caring and stopped caring about not just you, but the relationship itself. And now at least you have something to deal with. But people have to start speaking up, not in a pushy, demanding way, yet in an invitational way. I missed how close we used to be. Do you miss that too? What can I do to make it better for you? Just start having some conversations. Take a weekend away from the kids. I always tell my guys who have young kids at home, take your wife away from the kids for a weekend. And they always say, yeah, that really works. But a lot of people live so far apart from their families, and moms don't want to leave their kids with a stranger. And then I say, just wait a few years. Keep making time alone together as much as you can. Give her massages. Nurture the relationship and the connection. And when the kids are a few years older, start taking those dates with your wife. Women want to feel connected, to have sex. And, when people work and stuff, it's so easy to let that go, but you can't. You've got to watch. I have plants on my patio. And my plants, when they start looking wilty, I'm like, shit, I got to get out there and water them. I don't always want to water them, but you have to water your garden. That's what I'm trying to say. And my plants give me very quick feedback because they look droopy. Is your husband looking droopy? Is your wife looking droopy? You got to nurture those relationships. All it takes is like a minute a day, Now, let's go on with Xavier and Maria. While disagreeing with my methods, Maria asked another good question. How do I know he won't do it again? If you're a sex addict, the answer is I'll always be tempted, but I can call my sponsor, go to meetings, and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of successful psychotherapy, the answer is much different. The answer is, I won't do it again because I've changed, and the marriage has changed, or at least the way I deal with the marriage has changed. Sooner or later, he'll be trustworthy if he does the psychological work. Will she do the emotional work, enabling her to trust him, or will she never trust him again? Is she going to stay a self-righteous martyr? The sex addiction model says he'll never be cured, in which case she'd be a fool to ever trust him again. How awful. All of this said, one week Maria looked at me and simply said, "You're not helping, Dr. Klein. You're confusing us. You're telling me I'm wrong to be hurt and angry. Of course I wasn't. You're telling him everything he's done is fine. Of course I didn't. And you think anything goes. Of course I don't. I'm sorry, she's a bitch, okay? She's just a bitch. I'm no sympathy for Maria. This is why I would make a horrible coach, because I would just look at her and go, "You're just being a bitch," and that would probably not be good, very good. I gotta call it like I see it. Sorry. And at that moment, Xavier had to make a choice. Is he just a selfish bastard who didn't care how much he hurt Maria? No, Xavier replied. I'm a sex addict and will get treatment for my addiction. Now will you stay with me, Maria? Yes, she said, as long as you're being treated for your addiction. And so Xavier was welcomed into the fellowship of lifelong recovery. And Maria never trusted him again, and so she never welcomed him back into her life sexually. Their marriage never recovered from his infidelity, and they never agreed on why. Whether the subject is sex or not, rational people often behave irrationally, hurting themselves or those they love. When people are dissatisfied with their seemingly irrational behavior, they need to understand the emotional deficits they're trying to fill with various sexual behaviors. And they need to understand the desperation to be liked or the terror of being rejected that leads them to lie and deceive. And when intimacy breaks down between two people, they need new ways to negotiate sexual relationships, boundaries, and expression. Therapy is a powerful tool for exploring the huge range of non-sexual aspects of the sexual feelings, decisions, and behavior. But sex addiction treatment, when all you have is a hammer, all your problems look like nails. So this is really good. So in conclusion, this video dealt with two topics. Very briefly, we dealt with the topic of the entitled husband who feels entitled to sex and paints himself as the poor victim who gets denied, making him less and less attractive and more repulsive to the woman. And then a longer section on sex addiction as a made-up concept by people who don't understand that when people turn to someone outside their relationship, in many cases, if it's porn, I'm not talking about an affair, if it's porn use or seeing escorts, it's usually because the wife has become cold and distant, and there's two reasons to explore what's going on in my relationship. And often the guy doesn't want to address it because he's afraid to bring up the topic, or the wife is just cold and distant and he still loves his wife. He wants to stay in the relationship, but he doesn't have a sex addiction. He's just a normal man that's likes touch and affection that his wife isn't giving him, in my opinion. So that was a lot about sex addiction as a myth. And I think a lot of the 12-step stuff is bullshit, in my opinion. But that would be a whole different video, which I can make if people want to see it. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope you guys have a fabulous Sunday.